I'm your host, Stephen Ben, over here on the SportsTalkLine Network, where we talk sports 24/7, 365. Welcome to NFL Draft Talk featuring Connor Livesay, SportsTalkLine Senior NFL Draft Analyst. Good day, sir, and welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for always having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys. Now the draft's over, we'll be able to sit back, throw our feet up, and relax.
Oh, it's chill out time for sure, but as we talked before, with us, there is no rest for the weary. If we're not talking about the draft coming up, we're talking about the one that just ended. And in this case, we're going to put the spotlight on the Dallas Cowboys. And why don't we just knock the easy one right out of the park? Some people are for looking at it this way. Some people don't count this, but their first-round draft pick, wide receiver Amari Cooper, 24 years old, dynamic. He is a threat. He is a true WR1. You know you're going to get NFL talent that does translate, but you're going to have to pay him a non-rookie salary. How do you rate this pick, man?
I mean, you do it 9 out of 10 times. The one time you might pull a Oakland Raider where you go, we'll take the risk on getting rid of a proven veteran, young, talented wide receiver and try to just save the money and go elsewhere. But when you're a team like the Dallas Cowboys, whose offense is built around running the football, but also having that one dynamic player that can line up in the slot, can get open, can create separation, you do that trade. I do it 10 out of 10 times, but there's some people that might argue, hey, let's try to.
I love the trade. So, you're preaching to the choir here, man. Yeah, absolutely. But, we also talked about in the green room about one dynamic aspect of the trade that is a negative, okay? He is not going to be getting that rookie contract. It's going to be big money. Why? Because he's worth it. And then on top of that, the Cowboys, conversely, are not going to be able to pay somebody very shortly down the road. And you've got some ideas about that, right?
Yeah, and keeping it on draft topic, you mentioned Amari Cooper making money. He's going to get paid as one of the top wide receivers in the NFL because he's playing like one of the top wide receivers in the NFL. A situation in Oakland didn't work out for him. He comes to Dallas, completely changes the outlook of that team. Their playoff, you saw them go to the playoffs, win a playoff game, something they haven't been able to do. So his impact was so big that you don't mind the pick move for him, and you also don't mind paying him. But as you mentioned, that's gonna mean that means somebody's gonna be at the cost of that. And I think that guy is probably gonna be Malik Collins, the starting 3 technique for the Dallas Cowboys. Guy who's, when he's healthy, he's played well. He's a pass rusher. He's an up the field guy who can get in the backfield, make plays, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. And a team's likely in free agency next year going to look at his upside and go, man, we could give him a 3-year, $20 million deal, something where he's making $6, $7, $8 million a year. Cowboys are going to say, we got to give that money to Cooper. That's where Tristan Hill, their first pick in the NFL draft, came in out of UCF, a guy who they hope can slide in, push Collins for some playing time this year in 2019, but next year when they move on from Collins can step in, not miss a beat, and possibly even give them a little bit more of an upside play at that position.
I like where you're going, and actually, not to beat a horse too much, but the Cowboys lucked into a talent and in the next round, in the 3rd round, and they did not blink. They took Connor McGovern, guard. This also gives them some cap flexibility down the road along their offensive line, doesn't it?
And I think what you're going to see, staying on that same topic with the Cooper and the money, is Lyle Collins, whose contract is up at the end of this year. You look at a guy he's been pretty good. I'm not going to say he's been great. He hasn't been bad. He's been pretty good. I feel like he's played about a B- to C+ level at right tackle for the Cowboys. But they had just drafted Connor Williams out of Texas last year to play guard, a position that he wasn't really comfortable at. He had never played at the University of Texas. So you're able to, plan for the future. You get a guy like Connor Williams, who's probably more natural at tackle, move him out at right tackle, and then Connor McGovern, who can come in and be a really, really quality guard for the Dallas Cowboys. A guy I wasn't quite as high on as some people because of some of his struggles in his pass sets and pass blocking, but a guy who can get out in space. He's athletic, he's long, he's got the size, and he's got the run blocking ability right now to be a really, really good run blocking interior lineman.
Yeah, he's got strength. That's really nice. And then also a UDFA that they signed, you got to throw this kid into the mix, man, because of his daddy, right? You heard about the Larry Allen signing.
Yeah, and another tackle they brought in that a lot of people are high on, Larry Allen Jr. obviously is a guy that people are enamored
Oh
with.
yeah, I forgot to add Junior, didn't I? Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry about that.
everyone's
Okay.
enamored with Larry Allen Jr. right now because of his dad, obviously. But
Sure, sure.
you look at a guy like Mitch Hyatt as well, who was a
Yes.
UDFA out of Clemson, who was an All-American. Tape isn't very good. He's not on tape. He struggles a lot. He was an All-American left tackle at Clemson. People had him rated in the 4th, 5th round. To me, he was a 6th or 7th round pick. So I didn't see it on tape, but you look at a guy who's got size and strength and measurables like
Yeah,
Mitch Hyatt,
measurables.
take a chance being able to coach him up. But they got a couple of UDFA linemen that they really like. They paid a little bit of more money to than you're used to seeing in undrafted free agency. But between Connor McGovern and Tristan Hill, those are two they're not very sexy picks. You look at Tristan Hill, who was a reach for many, and me included. I had him as my 106th overall player, I want to say. So that's quite a bit of a reach for me. But the upside you see with him on tape is what made them look at that and go, man, this guy makes a ton of plays in the backfield. It's just not consistent enough. So they want to coach him up, get Rod Marinelli hands on him, and be able to coach him up to be more consistent as a under tackle in their 4-3 scheme.
Well, it's a nice backstory in that is they went down there on the pro day, and Marinelli went himself. And so they looked over and said, hey, Marinelli, you want to run some of these drills? And he's like, oh, yeah, give me a whistle, right? So, we've both seen how shy he is. And so he gets out there and gets really involved with this kid, and they kick off. They develop a relationship right away. And this kid seems to want to be pushed. He wants somebody to drive him. He wants to be the best. I understand that they exchange phone numbers, and the kid would actually call him, and say like, "Hey, coach, I'm up. I'm working out. I'm going." And they signed the contract with each other, that Marinelli has all of his players sign, where this is what I want you to do, and if you can't agree to do these things, then we're probably not going to get along. So, he looked at it. Each contract is a little individual with each player, I understand. They got that signed. I think this is one hell of a relationship. And I'm going to ask you this. Remember not too long ago where Coach Marinelli was working with, grocery baggers off the street. He's got to be feeling pretty good right about now, huh?
Yeah, there's no real excuses for Rod Marinelli anymore. And maybe that's a rough way to put it. But you got, DeMarcus Lawrence, who was practically a first-round pick when you look up what they gave up to get him. Taco Charlton, who was a guy that Rod Marinelli loved coming out of Michigan, who's been, to put it nicely, a bust so far in his career. Dorrance Armstrong was a 4th-round pick who showed some skills at the right defensive end position. Malik Collins was a 3rd-round pick not too long ago. Then Tristan Hill's 2nd-round pick. So the old grocery bagger, or the orphans, as Rod Marinelli likes to call them, that doesn't really fit that narrative anymore because of the talent, the money allocated to that position to come in and play. So if the defensive line isn't playing top 10 in the NFL, then there's going to be some fingers starting to point at Marinelli because he's got plenty of talent, and a lot of these guys on this roster are guys that he's wanted. The Taco Charltons, the Tristan Hills. So if those guys don't perform, then some fingers are going to start getting pointed at someone in that coaching staff.
Okay, and now here's the comparison, and I think this comparison is legit, even though it's from different eras, okay? One of the things that supposedly has been holding Marinelli's defense back is lack of a superior 3-tech, Warren Sapp. Okay, that is what this defense has been missing. He found the defensive backs that he needs that compares to that defense. He has the linebacker, the weak side linebacker that compares with that defense from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Until this guy, he did not have that 3-tech, which is the 3rd prong of that defense that's going to make it hit on all levels. Is this guy good enough?
I don't think so right now. I think maybe if he develops, I know that's kind of a cop-out, but if he develops into his upside that he showed on tape, then yes. But it was like 20% of the time you loved what you saw on tape. 50% of the time you were like, okay, this is, mediocre, C-level tape, and then
Right.
the other percent of the time you're disappointed. He was on the ground. He's on the ground so much because he plays with such poor pad level. He fires up out of his stance, gives up his chest plate. Offensive linemen get their hands on him.
He didn't start. He didn't start last year. He was not a starter. The new coaching staff came in and they put him in the rotation. He started one game. And that was something that a lot of teams were talking about, weren't they?
Yeah, and that's when last year was his best year when he didn't start.
Correct.
Because he wasn't on the field a lot. And that worries me because if you're drafting a guy in the top 60 picks, that guy should be playing a high percentage of the snaps and likely starting and playing most of the snaps. So if he couldn't do it at UCF against weaker Division I level talent in football, well, I just don't know.
That's a red flag, right? I mean, there's no other way to say it. That's a red flag.
Yeah, and you come in, with a guy that he didn't get along with the coaching staff. Didn't get along with a lot of the weight trainers. Work ethic. We talked about that. That was a lot of questions about him. His work ethic, his ability to be coached. Those are a lot of questions for a guy that I'm taking in the top 60. Especially when again you just see a guy who it's not like he was playing at Alabama and he couldn't get on the field. It was UCF, couldn't get on the field. His best year was the year he wasn't able to get on the field, but he was able to put his best
Says a lot, man. Says a lot. All right, it is what it is. I think the Cowboys hit it out of the park with the first-round draft pick. I think their second-round draft pick, however you view it, it's not an A, okay? It just can't be because of his lack of production in college. The fact he wasn't starting, it's not an A. I say at the most, it's a weak B. What do you think?
I mean, if we're just being honest and you're asking my honest opinion, I say that's a D plus.
Okay, a D plus. There you go.
I had him at 106 and they took him at 58. That's a huge reach.
All right, man. That's what we're here to do. We're here to shoot it and assess it. We take from there from an A to a D plus, which, whatever you want to call it. You want to call it a D plus. Then we go into the third round with Connor McGovern. And I tell you what, they bounced back strong here, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I like Connor McGovern. I guess when I understand why they did it. Again, I get that they're likely moving on from Malik Collins to help pay for some of these guys that they're, in love with. And I get that. I get that this is more of a building for the future pick. But when you don't have a first-round pick and you feel like you're in this win-now window, drafting a guy in the top 100 that's not going to see the field in year one it's not the best way to use those resources, those draft picks. And again, you never want to draft for need. That's not what you go into this doing. But you also want to add really, really good quality players that want to help your football team when you feel like you're this close to the Super Bowl in those top 100 picks. And I feel like they drafted two guys who either aren't going to see the field at all, or when they do see the field, it's probably going to be in a rotational role. If they had a first-round pick, I'd understand these moves a little bit more, but I feel like they went a little too safe here and went, we're going to keep drafting for the future, but we keep hearing them talk about win now, all in.
Oh, yeah. And, that's the thing. I mean, well, their first-round pick is going to see the field. So, okay, they got that one. Their second-round pick is going to see the field, but how much? We really don't know. Right now, we know he was a rotational player last year in not a strong division. That's what we know. All right. But we also know that Marinelli signed off on this pick personally. He went down big time. So, I think not only is Garrett on the hook this year, Marinelli's on the hook this year. They're rowing the same boat, aren't they?
Yeah. And going back to the Tristan Hill pick, like you were doing, I feel like this was exactly what they did with both Taco Charlton and Leighton Vander Esch a few years ago, because with Taco Charlton, I felt like no matter who was going to be on the clock at that point, they needed defensive end help, so they were taking the guy. No matter if one of these studs fell to him, it wasn't going to matter.
And Watt got picked.
Yep. Watt got picked after. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. You're right.
They took Taco with Watt still on the clock and could have had T.J. Watt, but they took Taco because they had kind of forced themselves into that pick, I think. And they had talked themselves into that pick. And I think the same thing happened last year. Worked out for them with Leighton Vander Esch. But it didn't matter if Derwin James ended up, getting to him. It didn't matter if Tremaine Edmonds ended up getting to him. If Leighton Vander Esch was available at pick 19 last year, he was going to be the pick no matter who fell to them at that spot.
I think that's accurate.
And I think the same thing happened this first year, if Tristan Hill was going to be available, it didn't matter if the safety, because all the safeties were there. Nazir Adderley, Taylor Rapp.
Oh, yeah, every one of them. And good ones, good safeties.
They went defensive line. So that tells me they had their mind made up going in that if he was there, he was going to be the pick.
But in the third round, they showed flexibility, which is really mind-blowing. And, I hear everything you're saying about, you want these first 3 picks to be able to contribute the first year. And ideally, this guy will not contribute, okay?
No,
I mean, that's going to be the thing. But I think his talent level was such that they looked at that and said, you know what? Screw it. Let's go. And then also, I think they were looking at a few other guys that had just gone.
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it, too, is some of the guys that they wanted went before their pick, and they kind of got panicked a little bit and said, you know what, let's just take the best player on our board. He was a second-round pick to them is everything I'm hearing. So at the end of the third round, when you have some of your guys who ended up going off the board right before you pick, you kind of just end up going, do we sit here try to trade back, or do we look at the top of our board and pick the best player? And it sounds like that's what they did.
Well, this whole draft with the Dallas Cowboys, I'm going to dub it right now. It's like a Clint Eastwood movie because it's the good and the bad and the ugly, all right? So let's get on to the bad. Okay, I mean, there's a lot to like about the first 3 picks. I mean, sure, they blinked once, but still there's a lot of talent there. Tony Pollard, the running back, they took with the 26th pick of the 4th round. First of all, I like the kid. I think he's a good player. He's dynamic. He can help return kicks. He is grease lightning. He's got speed. He's got good balance. I like him, but man, I just thought that was a reach. What's your take on this?
Same thing. I had him as a 7th round pick in the draft. And I think this is another example of what we just talked about. I think they talked themselves into, if this guy's available on day 3, we want him. We don't want to risk it. We want him. When realistically, they could have drafted their cornerback, Isaiah Johnson, who they really liked out of Houston, who went the next pick. They could have drafted him at 128. And Tony Pollard would have been there at their 2nd, 4th round pick, probably at their 5th round pick or their 6th round pick. So it was a reach, and they lost out on some talent there because they reached for him. So you hate. That's what I gave this draft a C-, and that was probably me being a little nice because they did make some big blunders in this draft. And I think with their 2nd round pick and then their first 4th round pick, they I'm not gonna say they screwed it up, but they did take some reaches, and I don't think they're going to turn out to be, very, very solid, starting caliber, rotational style players for them. Tony Pollard's not a backup running back. He's a scat back. He's a guy who's going to line out, he's going to line up outside. He's going to motion. He's going to run the jet sweeps. He's going to return kicks. He's not a guy that you want running the ball 16 to 20 times a game. So why are we drafting? I just don't get why you're drafting that guy with your first 4th round pick. That's a 6th round pick kind of guy to me.
Since Scott Linehan and Garrett have got together in a coffee shop somewhere back in the day, and I understand Linehan's no longer here, okay? The Dallas Cowboys have been in love with finding the next Reggie Bush. All right.
I think
that they went with, what was it?
Lance Dunbar.
Lance Dunbar, okay,
Yeah.
Lance Dunbar. Then from there, Tavon Austin right now, okay? And they played around with a couple guys in between Dunbar and him. And all of these guys have injury issues, so they got another guy with injury issues. Okay, I get it. You get him on the team, but it's not like those guys brought so much because ultimately they all got injured every year. I mean, it's like, they'd be dynamic for a few games and then they'd be gone. So I don't understand the chase for it, except it's an interesting part in the scheme that Garrett wants to employ. And I have no idea exactly what that scheme is. But, I mean, I agree. Just fell in love with this guy. Yeah. And then they come back, and in the 5th, they do a similar thing. They go, good and bad, because Michael Jackson, cornerback. Now, admittedly, they should have gone cornerback earlier. I agree with your take on that. But I like this kid, Michael Jackson. But then they come back and get his teammate, Joe Jackson. I mean, like, what's up with this? You could probably have got that guy almost as a UDFA, right? No,
I had it flipped. I had Joe Jackson ranked in the top 120. I think he was my 123rd overall player.
Uh-huh.
So they got good. I love the value of Joe Jackson. He's a guy who he actually reminds me a lot of Taco Charlton, which doesn't sound good, but if you get Taco Charlton,
it does at this draft pick.
Exactly. If you draft Taco Charlton in the 5th round, you're kind of you're excited about what he's brought. A couple sacks a year, plays a run, rotational guy. I think that's what he is. He's a big, long, kind of stiff guy who gets by with speed to power, gets by using his length. Not a technically sound guy, but a guy who he put on some weight in the last few years and kind of, I think that hurt his overall athletic short area quickness. But I actually really like these two fifth-round picks, Joe Jackson and Michael Jackson. Two guys who got size. They got the length for the positions that they play. Michael Jackson's an athlete. He's more of an athlete than Joe Jackson.
Right, yeah. He's a Byron Jones guy that they got at this level, is what I think. All right. I mean, he's sparky. He's got a lot of those attributes. He can play some safety. He can play some corner. They can move him around. He should be an instant help on special teams. He's a really hard worker. I really like this guy. I didn't know that about Joe Jackson. He was a guy I wasn't that familiar with. I looked at his production and went like, okay, but he just didn't seem that dynamic to me. But if you like him, I like him.
And he's not dynamic, but obviously he's not a dynamic guy. But he's a guy who I think can be a productive left end in this.
Oh no, I like him. I thought this was a little high for him in my instance. At the end here, I want to get over to the depth chart, and I love that the way the depth chart is figuring out. But I think it adds a lot of credence to what you're saying about they fell in love with a few positions and said, look, we're going to get a guy to fill this slot, this slot, this slot. And they didn't let the draft come to them that well, did they?
No, they didn't. And I think their best picks were everything after Tony Pollard on day 3. I think these next few picks we're going to talk about are ones that I'm going to be pretty excited about.
I'm very excited about the next one. Okay, let's jump right to him. Donovan Wilson, safety, Texas A&M, round 6, pick 41. Talk to me about some Donovan Wilson. The more I learn about this kid, the more I like him.
Yeah, I hadn't watched Donovan Wilson. He was one of the few players. I probably had like 13 or 14 guys that were drafted before the 7th round that I hadn't watched, and he was one of them. So at the time, not to say I was disappointed in the pick, but I just figured, man, I'd watched 322 guys. He wasn't one of them, so I figured I was going to be disappointed. But when I turned on the tape, watched him, he's a guy that he's like the poor man's Jonathan Abram from Mississippi State who went in the 1st round. He's a guy he's a bigger, more athletic, stronger box safety who tackles well, hits hard. And I think the hit hard is more accurate than the tackles well. He's a guy who hits hard. He doesn't always tackle well. So those, that and his lack of coverage ability are the few things that I saw on tape that, concerned me. But when you're talking about a 6th-round safety,
round 6, there you go.
He might be this year's Kayvon Frazier, a guy who the Cowboys drafted in the 6th round 3 years ago out of Central Michigan. This time they go Donovan Wilson out of Texas A&M, a similar style of player who can hit, can run, but just struggles in coverage and struggles tackling consistently. So big guy that can hit.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was just going to, move on and just, be really excited. The Cowboys needed somebody to represent, to fill into the pipeline, into the funnel, a box safety, somebody that could get in. This kid seems to fit the bill, right?
Yeah, and they got Jeff Heath there, they got Kayvon Frazier there, they got George Ioka there. So that's 3 strong safeties on that roster already. So it's going to be tough for him to squeak his way on. He'll probably need he'll probably need a training camp injury or really just impress in training camp and preseason to find himself on the roster. But again, if he plays well, then Kayvon Frazier, you better step up. You better play well. You better stay healthy. You better be on the field. George Ioka.
A lot of times, these 6th-round, 7th-round picks and stuff like that, that's their biggest value to the team, is pressing those guys in front of them, isn't it?
Yep. No, that's true. And Kayvon Frazier's into a contract year. George Ioka obviously just signed a 1-year deal, a contract year. So maybe these guys come out and play better because they have some young, hungry.
It generally helps.
Yeah.
All right, well, then the next guy is a pick that I really love because before they're taking a running back, that again, I like the running back. There's a lot of talent there in Pollard, but limited usage. I mean, if Zeke goes down, you're not going to stick Pollard in there and go. Mike Weber, on the other hand, talk to me about Mike Weber.
Yeah, Mike Weber's a guy who has 3-down potential. He doesn't do anything all that above average. He's kind of average in all 3 areas, and his running skills and man and zone, his pass protection skills, his receiving skills. But he's a solid back to grab in the 7th round. I think I had a 6th-round grade on him, so he's a guy that you got a little bit later than I think you probably could have got him. But he's like the poor man's Jay Ajayi, in my opinion. A guy who's got some size on him, some thickness on him. can run in between the tackles, can bounce it outside, show some burst at the line of scrimmage, can catch the ball, can pass protect. But again, Jay Ajayi is a guy who kind of same thing, came in as a later round draft pick, was able to have some production, but wasn't all that explosive in any one area, wasn't all that dynamic in any one area. I think that's Mike Weber, but just on a lower scale, a guy who can do everything, but he's just not going to overly impress you in any of those things.
Hey, it's a guy that you hope you come in, you put him behind a superior offensive line, you have a really good quarterback and this around him. He's a guy that's not going to hurt you.
No,
and so
I think he's an up. I would say that right now he's an upgrade as a true runner over Rod Smith, the guy that they had in as their backup running back last year.
There you go. Yeah, I think the biggest issue with Rod Smith, leaving is you never like to see a brother tandem. Broke up.
That's got to be awkward.
Yeah, totally.
And
All right, well then let's.
Quick, the thing that hurt Rod Smith too is he's just such a big, tall back that he doesn't run with that low center of gravity, low pad level. He's just such a big, stiff, tall guy that those aren't you. That's why you see your running backs at 5'10". Ezekiel Elliott's a 5'10", 5'11", 215.
Do you remember the running back Smith that played for the Vikings for a few years? Really an upright runner. Only played for a few years because he got T-boned a lot.
Yeah.
But he had speed, just really good speed. And Rod Smith never had that. He would get up, and once he get those wheels moving, I mean, you're not going to catch him. Not very many guys, but he didn't have that quickness. And then, like you said, his pad level was always so upright. So I really had hopes for him at fullback, but that didn't work out either.
No, I like Weber. He's a shorter, stockier guy who's just gonna get the tough yards and show a little burst here and there. So I'm excited to see what he can do in the preseason. That's gonna be a big year for him.
All right, that's exciting stuff. Well, the last pick is another pick that I tell you what, man, you got to give the scouting department a nod here. This is a guy that was not on my radar, Jalen Jinks, 6'5", 256 pounds. He's got the arms. He's not a round one quickness guy, but he's not slow either. Talk to me about him.
Yeah, Jalen Jelks is a Senior Bowl guy, who I think impressed a lot at the Senior Bowl coming in. And you mentioned it. He's a guy that you want to play him a weak side defensive end. He's almost 6'6". He's got good length. He's not an overly big, just strong guy. He's 256, I think, is what he weighed in at the combine. So he's a sub 260 guy. He's got good length, good height on him. And he's not, like you said, he's not slow. He's not stiff. But he's not figured out how to use that nimbleness in his legs and in his arms and in his hips. So he's putting that together still, which is it's a project. As a late seventh round pick, he's there for a reason. But you gotta love his attributes as a physical right defensive end that can probably play the run a little bit better than a lot of your smaller pass rushers. But he's got some traits that you really like. It's going to be, again, tough for him to make the roster with the amount of bodies they have at defensive end, defensive tackle. But a guy that you do think that you can probably come in, develop. If he doesn't make it year one, he could probably stick around on the practice squad. And then next year, you'd really want to see him blossom into a player that could possibly be a rotational weak side defensive end for you.
All right, well, now we've gone down and done the caps. I'm going to hit you with three things that the Cowboys really needed to deal with in this NFL draft, in this offseason, but specifically in the draft. And that is they needed to give themselves some cap flexibility down the road. You and I have talked about that. They did that early, right? And got some more help in the second and third round in that regard. But they also had to deal with a double loss, if you will, defection of Randy Gregory and David Irving off of the defensive line. And those were big losses. And they lost David Irving last year. I mean, he was never really effective when he was there. And now he's gone. But the Cowboys spent a lot of resources and a lot of time because they needed somebody dynamic in that position. They have now spent a second-round pick on that position, all right? And as I'm like you, I definitely think that they were locked in on this guy. I'm not asking you if you think he was worth that second-round pick. What I'm asking you is he going to upgrade that position, because it's obviously very important to them, this year?
I mean, I would say right now, no. I think they brought a guy in free agency, Kerry Hyder from Detroit. I think Kerry Hyder's a better version of Tristan Hill. And I really think that right now Kerry Hyder's in jeopardy of not making the team because they drafted Tristan Hill, which I don't like as a talent guy who wants to just have the best players on the
No.
football team. But I compared Kerry Hyder as a three technique and Tristan Hill as a three technique as very similar players, guys who, they're high effort, high motor. They have some quickness off the snap. They can get in the backfield, not the best finishers, but guys who can get in the backfield, can disrupt the pocket. And I don't know, I think you're going to look at Tristan Hill rookie year as kind of similar way that we saw, the Taco Charlton rookie year, a guy who you're kind of disappointed with at the end of the year, but he's able to get on the field, get a sack or two, make some plays, but it just wasn't consistent, kind of similar to what his career arc at UCF was.
Well, he's a good egg, but like Grandpa said, a hen's ass is full of them. I mean, that's the epitome of a jag, right?
Yeah, and again, I think his ceiling is what made him so intriguing at that spot, because you see the traits, you see the athletic ability, you see the upside on the tape. He just wasn't able to put it together at UCF, so I don't know what makes.
So that's on Marinelli now. That pick and Marinelli they are bound at the hip, aren't they?
Yeah, correct. And I'm going to keep my eyes
on. That's as it should be.
I'm going to keep my eyes on Taylor Rapp and Juan Thornhill, two guys that I was really high on that went slightly right thereafter.
I could not believe that. Could not believe that. And so basically they could have had a guy that plays just like the guy they drafted, and they could have had a dynamic safety. Moving on along, the other thing, though, is Randy Gregory, okay? The combination of bringing in Quinn, all right, and then backing it up with what they did there in the 7th round. How are they looking at defensive end?
I mean, I think they're heavy at defensive end. They're deep at defensive end. You got DeMarcus Lawrence, Taco Charlton. I think that's the guy who needs to, I hope he doesn't think just because he was a first-round pick that his job's safe, because he's a guy that could be on the bubble.
They benched him last year, didn't they?
Yep, you got, DeMarcus Lawrence, Robert Quinn, Randy Gregory, who's hopefully not going to see any suspension this year. We're still waiting to hear about that. Tyron Crawford, a guy who can play defensive end, also can play some under tackle.
Joe Jackson, Kerry Hyder, who can also play some defensive end and some under tackle. Dorrance Armstrong, who I know they're still really high on. That's true.
So, they have a really, really deep defensive end, edge, whatever you want to call it, depth chart. So there's going to be a great training camp battle going on between some of the Taco Charltons, the Kerry Hyders, the Dorrance Armstrongs, and the Joe Jacksons of the world, because out of those four guys, there's only going to be one or two, maybe two, at most two spots available between those four guys.
Okay, well now, when you look at the overall depth chart of the team and you look where their players fill in that they picked up, you got Connor McGovern now. One of the problems the Cowboys have had in recent years is along that offensive line, they get an injury and they just have not been able to pick up the slack. It's really, really hurt their cohesiveness and what they do. Now, all of a sudden, they are deep for at least 1 year along the offensive line. Last time they were this deep, they went really, really far. That was when Leary was the left guard. Now they have people inside, they have people outside that are under contract from Joe Looney, etc. I mean, they are now strong. Overall, whether it's a good draft or a bad draft, the offseason is a combination of a lot of things. At the end of the day, do you think that the Cowboys are a stronger team when they open training camp than they ended the year?
Yeah, definitely. They lost Cole Beasley. They replaced him with what I think can be a better player in Randall Cobb, a guy we haven't even mentioned. I think he brings a more dynamic ability to that position, a guy who can make plays after the catch. The Robert Quinn addition, I think, is going to work wonders, because there was never any consistency from the weak side defensive end position. It was Randy Gregory making a splash play here and there, but wasn't ever consistent. Taco Charlton was pretty much non-existent. Tyron Crawford played over there a little bit, but never really could do a whole lot from right defensive end.
Crawford's a glue guy. You move him around. Yeah. I mean, he'll have one or two plays a year that are going to be big plays, but I think the best thing that Crawford brings to the game, is that locker room leadership and the fact that he will not hurt you at any of these positions that you're moving him around.
His versatility and his consistency, his reliability as a player up and down the line. But yeah, the Robert Quinn addition, I think, is going to be huge, because that gives them a true right side defensive end, a guy who can play. You're probably not going to start and play him 80% of the snaps, but a guy who, when he's on the field, you're going to have two guys getting after the quarterback every single time, no matter if it ends in a sack, it ends in a hurry, it ends in a pressure. quarterback hit, whatever, you're going to have two guys that defenses are going to, or offenses are going to have to look for and put a running back out there, put a tight end out there. And that then takes a player off the field or slows his development down on the field for an offensive team,
right,
which makes your cornerbacks cover longer, makes your linebackers get a little bit deeper.
Ka-ching.
Yep. So Robert Quinn, Randall Cobb, two huge free agents additions that we're not used to seeing the Cowboys make, I think are going to make huge dividends. I still really like Kerry Hyder. I hope he makes the roster because I think he's a guy who can rush from three technique, can rush from left end, give you some juice off the edge and from the interior. And then again, while I'm not enamored with the Tristan Hill pick, I think he's a guy who could probably come in and can definitely, apply some pressure, be disruptive.
I love him as a rotation guy, man. You put Hyde in the front, and that's what he excelled at and everything. This first year as a rotation guy, I do have to give the Cowboys coaches credit for benching Taco Charlton last year instead of going, "Oh, you're a first-round pick, we've got to play you." But of course they are deep enough at defensive end where they were able to make that decision. But it's the same thing here. I don't think they have to handle this kid with kid gloves. I think that they're very clear with them, like, hey, if you don't do it the right way, we got a bench and we got to see you, hello, goodbye. It is what it is. These coaches know, at least I'm pretty sure Jason Garrett knows, he's got to get it out of him this year or forget it for him, right?
Yeah. And I think that's why you got to be a little bit excited about this because you feel like even though I feel like we've said this the last 3 or 4 years, you feel like the coaching staff's on a hot seat. Kellen Moore's the new OC. Has a lot of, I think a little bit of pull in that room. I think he had a lot to do with that Tony Pollard pick. So if they're letting guys make some of these draft picks, make some of these decisions, then that says maybe Garrett's letting his hands off that playbook a little bit and is going to let, Moore do some of the things that he
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I do too, of course. I think the more new, fresh ideas you can get in, the more, jet sweeps you can add, the more play action you can add, the more, just getting the ball out quick. This is a team that still, for whatever reason, wanted to run a lot of stop routes, a lot of go routes. Well, there's so many other things you can do as an offense nowadays with jet sweeps and other kind of screens and crossers.
Yeah, the versatility, man, the stuff that hasn't been there for a while. However, the Cowboys now, and this is the last thing we're going to talk about it, with what they've done here, with the way that they backed up, with the true depth of this offensive line, is this possibly, does this have the potential to be as dominant as they were just a few years ago? Or is Leary going just, without Leary and Free, it's just not going to be the same?
I think you could see it. It's just, you never know with the health with these guys. The older they get with Travis Frederick, you don't know the Guillain-Barré syndrome. You don't know how that's going to affect his overall power, strength as a center. You don't know if Tyron, Smith's going to stay healthy. You don't know if Connor Williams is adapted to left guard and is going to play like he did at the end of the year. So there's still a lot of questions surrounding the offensive line. But I think if everyone's healthy, if everyone's playing at their full potential, then yes, I think they could play like that 2016, 2014 offensive line that we saw go to the playoffs.
That is scary news if you're in the NFC East, man. That is scary news. All right, well, man, it's been an awesome show. Before you sign off here, Connor, how about telling everybody listening about the social media stuff where they can find you, etc.?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Connor NFL Draft. So, follow me on Twitter. If you already don't, make sure you're following SportsTalkLine on Twitter, Steven on Twitter, all the other writers on Twitter. And then we're still hopefully gonna be doing some, draft review grades and stuff like that. I don't like to grade drafts 3 days after they happen because you have no idea what these players are doing. But looking at some of the drafts that I like, looking at some of the drafts I don't like, and kind of putting a power ranking grade, whatever you want to call it.
All right. Well, Connor, as always, thank you so much for being here. It's a true pleasure. And for everybody listening, as Connor said, be sure and follow us at SportsTalkLine on Twitter and on YouTube. Be sure and give us that subscribe and follow on Facebook. You know what to do there. We thank you so much. We're going to be coming back. We're going to be reviewing all of the big teams in the NFL draft. Be doing that over the next few weeks. So until next time, we appreciate you being here and listen like you play with intensity.